Sometimes we are so busy doing ministry that we forget to slow down and remember the why for ministry. At Easter, the details, the egg hunts, and the service prep can cloud our view of Christ and the cross. And to be honest, the idea that Sunday is coming can seem more like a threat when we're thinking of all the volunteer callouts than it is a reminder of the resurrection. But I truly believe that it does not have to be that way.
Hey there, and welcome to the KidzMatter podcast, your go-to resource for all things children's ministry. Each week, we bring you fresh ideas, inspiring stories, and practical insights to help you lead, love, and serve kids like never before. Whether you're just getting started or you're a seasoned pro, we're glad you're here. Let's get started.
I'm Hannah Augustine, and I have been there. When ministry gets busy and life feels full, it's difficult to fix our eyes on Jesus and all that he's done. But hear me, it may be difficult, but it's not impossible. And today's episode with Christen Clark is all about remembering the holy parts of Holy Week. Before we dive in, something new is coming to the KidzMatter Conference, and it's going to be big. If you missed our episode several weeks ago with guest Charlie Alcock, I'm going to catch you up to speed. Starting this October at our 2026 conference, we'll be providing a youth pastor track. That's right, we're inviting your youth pastor to the party, and this is more than a track with informational sessions. It's an experience and an invitation for your youth pastor to step into the community and the support that we offer here at KidzMatter. We really believe that the future of the church is going to require kids and youth leaders to work together, and this is a great place to start. To learn more, you can check out that episode from March 2nd, and you can get your tickets for the conference at thekidsmatterconference.com. The early bird rate is still live, and if it's your first time attending, there's a little bit of a discount for you or your youth pastor if it's their first time. Now, I have Christen Clark with me today. She is passionate about helping families grow in faith together. She has 18 years of ministry experience, which really just sets her up to share some incredible wisdom with us today. And she does some really, really cool things with her 2 podcasts. So after this episode, I'm going to be asking her for all the podcasting tips because she's running 2 at once. But today, we're talking about how to prepare our hearts and the hearts of the kids and families we serve for Holy Week. Christen, I would love to hear a little bit if you just want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your 2 podcasts.
Would love to. Yeah, my name is Christen Clark. I am a mom. I'm a wife. I live in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and the pollen is attacking us right now. So we're all experiencing the little tickle in the back of our throats, but it's good. It's good. I did full-time ministry, like you said, for about 18 years. And now I have the opportunity to serve a number of different churches as a ministry coach. I do some speaking things for different workshops and different events. And I have 2 podcasts, like you said. So I started the Collide Kids podcast in 2020. When the world shut down, all the creative people went, what do we do with our hands? And so I decided to start a podcast. I really felt like it was something the Lord was leading me to. I was looking for something for my kids to listen to, and I couldn't find what I was looking for. So I decided to create it. And I've been having so much fun. I haven't been able to stop. I've met some incredible people and just had amazing opportunities through that show. And just this past fall, I started a new podcast called 7-Minute Devotions for Busy Parents, because one of my passions is equipping families, and my spiritual gift is teaching. I love being able to teach. And I was finding that I was missing kind of that part of what I wanted to do, and just decided that this would be something that would be effective and helpful for ministry leaders to pass along to families, but also just to reach those people that I know in my circle that are looking for easy content, something that they can quickly listen to, and just equips them for their week. And so the 7-minute devotion comes out twice a week. I'd like to get it to every day, and a few people have been like, why isn't this every day? But still working towards that. Right now we're doing 2 times a week. It's just 7 minutes long, so it's easy to listen to. It's a great resource for kids ministry leaders to pass along to their families if you're looking for resources, as well as the Collide Kids podcast, which is a show for the whole family to listen to together. So it's for kids, but parents get a lot out of it. I have a lot of parenting people and a lot of authors and resource providers that give lots of great things for families. It's really a show the whole family can enjoy together. And I love doing it. It's so fun.
I think both of those are so fantastic. I did listen to an episode of each of them just to make sure I was up to speed on all the amazing things you're doing. And I love that you're hitting a niche that a lot of people aren't, that you're providing, Christian godly content for families to be able to consume. How many times a week are families in the car, right? And they need something that they could put on that everybody's going to be able to enjoy. And even the episode I listened to was so conversational. It was introducing families to a great new resource, a new kids book series, which, hello, if you've got readers, you're always looking for new books that are clean, godly, appropriate. And then, yeah, that 7 minutes, you can throw that on while you're prepping breakfast or, brushing your teeth. That's an easy, quick listen, but it's going to give you that fuel for the day, and even listening to it in the car with your kids. So definitely check those out, and we'll give you those links in the show notes so you can watch those. And like Kristen said, I think being able to equip your parents, we hear this in the Facebook group, we see it in KidMin Academy, where KidMin leaders are wanting to equip parents. Sometimes we try to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to go create your own podcast. If you've called to do that, great. But it's also wonderful to share other kingdom resources and to know that Kristen is out here trying to resource you and your families. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to start your own podcast on top of all the other things you're doing. Use these incredible resources that are available. With the gift of teaching, Kristen, I think we're going to need to pull you into Academy. I've got an idea about maybe our family ministry module in May. So I'll be sending you an email after this.
Let's do it.
Let's dive in to talk a little bit about Easter. I know, having been, in ministry, I know you've experienced having been in ministry. Easter, Christmas, it just goes so fast, and it can be very, very difficult to slow down your soul long enough. I think if we're honest, sometimes we can even feel a little resentful of those big holidays, which we don't want, and by any means, but it can feel so busy. At the church I was at, we would have 8 to 10 Easter services over the weekend, and so you're just going, please, Lord, am I going to survive? Are my feet going to make it? Is my heart going to make it? And I think it's so important to take the time to prep our hearts so that it's not just an event to survive, but it's a season to experience. Why do you think Holy Week preparation matters spiritually for us and our families?
If you think about how much of an effort we put into Christmas and all the different things that happen with Christmas, Christmas is great, but really the purpose of Christmas is to celebrate what's going to happen at Easter and Holy Week. When we put all of our, I was going to say all of our eggs in that basket, but pun intended, when we put all of this focus on Easter and all of our efforts to celebrate, which it is a celebration. I love Christmas events and music and all the different things. Coming back to Easter, it kind of gets the back seat. Sometimes I think, like you said, with preparing our hearts and getting ready for it, some churches are really good about preparing you different services and offering different things, not just for Easter Sunday, but all throughout the week. But if you're not at a church that does that, or you can't attend all the different activities that are happening, it can be a little daunting to do that on your own. And so I think it's just really coming down to the heart of why we are celebrating and what the purpose is of our celebration as a family and as a ministry, and then how we can better keep our hearts and eyes focused on who Jesus is, what he's done for us. This is the cornerstone of the gospel. And this is the reason that we do what we do. This is the reason I'm in ministry. It's the reason you're in ministry, is because of the resurrection. So we really have to take some time in the busyness, in the crazy season, to really sit down and sit with what it is and not take it for granted and let it be one of those things that we just kind of pass through because it's something we have to do. I think it's really important that we keep our eyes focused on that cornerstone of the gospel.
That's a really good point. I think we do emphasize Christmas a great deal, and some of that's probably because culture, put so much weight on it. And so I think as Christians, we feel not just a pressure, but we want to kind of take that back and remind ourselves like what Christmas is really about. But like you said, I think Easter, especially depending on your faith tradition, I know a lot of people practice Lent, but not everybody does. And so many people leading into Christmas may be doing an Advent devotional or an Advent study. And why wouldn't we want to place the same emphasis on Easter, if not more, and being intentional, even if it's just a 7-day YouVersion or book that you can take a few minutes just to remind yourself the timeline of Holy Week and all the things that Jesus did. It was one of the most action-packed weeks of his ministry. Taking that space to reflect and remind yourself, not rush forward to Sunday, not rush forward to okay, we made it, Jesus is alive, but reminding ourselves, especially for those of us that maybe got saved at a very young age. And so we've heard the story 8 million times. Like you said, this is the cornerstone. This is why we do what we do. Taking that time to pause and reflect on my need for a savior, my
Right.
need for Jesus's death on the cross. Even the Saturday, taking that moment to be reminded of what it was like in the middle when we didn't know, when we didn't have the hope of the resurrection yet. Placing ourselves in the shoes of the disciples, in the shoes of the people who were there, can be so intentional.
I had the privilege when I was in my 20s, when I first started in ministry, I was working at a church that did a big Easter production. We did the Passion of the Christ. It was a passion play, and we actually performed it in the Atlanta Civic Center. So it was a very large venue in downtown Atlanta, and it was a tradition for like 50 years. It was amazing to be a part of it. And I just remember really having to dive into the story because I had to portray a character. The directors would tell us every person in this show is significant. Like from the person that's just standing in the back waving palm branches for when Jesus was going through Jerusalem, to the people who were serving and helping and the disciples and the women followers. I did it for a few years and had an opportunity to play some different parts. I really treasured those times because I got to focus on the different people that were involved in that story. When I look back and I read the Gospels and I read those stories, I feel this familiarity, like I was there. Like I wasn't, but it feels like I was. And so I miss that. I wish my kids could experience that. We've been trying to, watch The Chosen or dive into some different things that give that experience of the emotions. The emotional array of the Holy Week is incredible because there's celebration, there's betrayal, there's all these amazing things that happened through that time. There were miracles that were performed. And then there was grieving and desperate sadness for what was happening and what was taking place. And it's a wild ride if you really dive into what's happening. That's just a great way for families and for ministry leaders to think through, what was it like? How did people experience that time? And what were they seeing? It's such a blessing that I got to do that, got to be a part of that. And I treasure that.
That's a great perspective. Putting yourself in the shoes, very literally, in the sandals that you're, hey, let's walk through this. You mentioned The Chosen. I think it really does put you in the story and help you think through what would it maybe have been like. Obviously, there's some interpretation there, but what would it have been like to be there in those moments? Maybe as a family, you're probably working Good Friday, you might be working Easter Sunday, but what does it look like the week before to say, hey, let's watch something that would be appropriate for whatever age your kids are, just to get your hearts kind of there and then have some discussion. It doesn't have to be complicated,
Right.
but what did you think about that we just watched? What would you do if you had been there on Palm Sunday? How would you feel if you had seen Jesus on the cross? Taking your family through so that your kids are feeling that experience at whatever age they may be, and putting themselves in. They've got the imagination, being able to say, hey, let me put myself in the story and really think through what it would have been like to be there.
Right.
Now, when you think about Holy Week, what do you wish more ministry leaders understood about the significance of the timeline? I think it's less common for churches to do like a Good Friday or a Maundy Thursday. That's not as common anymore. Where would you kind of focus on the significance of that whole timeline and the lead up, the build up?
We kind of glaze over the whole week and we get to, yay, he rose from the dead. But we miss out on the significance of that if we're not talking about what happened, if we're not going through that story, if we're not talking about the crucifixion and the significance of that and how much Jesus fulfilled prophecy from the Old Testament because of that, and how many followers and people were devastated and were impacted from this whole week. Giving kids an opportunity to go through that whole week really helps paint the picture of why Easter Sunday is so significant. We kind of take it for granted. And I was talking to my friend Vanessa Myers, and she was saying that one of her kids was like, we did this story last year. Like, we don't have to do this story. We already know it. And I think we all kind of feel that way. Like, oh, we know this story. We know what happened. But it's so important to the gospel. And I think it's good to remind kids, you might already have heard this story, but the reason we talk about this every year is because it's so important to our faith and helping kids to understand that, the significance and the lead up and what Jesus did for us. That's why we celebrate on Easter Sunday, the resurrection. It's really helping kids to walk through that whole timeline of emotions and that timeline of the events that led up to that. So they have a full understanding, because I think it's really important to understand that kids do understand the gospel. They can process it, they can hear it, and they can know what you're trying to get across. And more than we think, like more than we give them credit. I think a lot of times we think kids don't really understand all of this, but some kids may understand more than others, but I think it's good for us to repeat and to give them that information. That's important.
I think that's absolutely right. A lot of teaching is repetition. And I love that you took that time to say, we do learn this story every year. And here's why. And we used to do when we were little, we had those resurrection eggs. And oh my goodness, we look forward to that every year when we would, go through the story with our parents. If you've never used them, you open and like each of the eggs has a little symbol of Easter that walk you through the story. The burial cloth, the rock that represents the stone, the crown of thorns, all these things that as kids, it was a fun interactive activity, but it walked us through the significance and, pausing after every egg for our parents to tell us that little piece of the story and to connect the dots. And I remember, think just being so touched and moved. I think that was a little whip or a crown and all of those different things. And you're just experiencing the story. Like you said, we have to give kids credit for what they're capable of understanding. We had Carl Lafferton on the podcast a couple months ago with the Good Book Company, and he talked about their newest Bible, which focuses on the promises of God. The Bible said, the prophet said that Jesus would walk through on a donkey fields, helping kids connect those dots and not letting it be an isolated story of, well, Jesus rode on a donkey and then Jesus was anointed with oil and all of those things. There's a bigger picture here, and there's so much that God was doing. What are some of the rhythms, both for your family, but maybe just for yourself? What are some rhythms or practices that help you stay focused on the purpose of Easter and the joy of it?
Taking the time, like setting aside intentional time to read the scriptures together as a family, to make sure that we're contemplating going through what happened. We've talked about The Chosen. I'm horrible to watch The Chosen with, especially as a seminary student, because we'll be going through, I'll be like, pause it, wait, okay, you need to look at this. Okay, let's look up. Okay, do you know why he said that? It's a 3-hour process sometimes. So the kids are like, no, we don't want to watch it because they don't want to watch it with me. Anyway, I think it's just really important that we are being intentional about setting aside that time. And just thinking through those practical elements of what Easter is all about and how we can apply those things to how we're living today. Like, why is this significant to us today? I mean, it is about the gospel, but also the many things that Jesus was able to do, the way he interacted with his disciples when he washed their feet, the way that he laid down his own life. We can see all these different things that we can not just be grateful for. We're grateful that Jesus did those things, but we can also use that as an example in our own life. How can we sacrifice for others? How can we share the gospel with our friends? How can we put others first? And so there's so many different ways that we can pull things out of that story and understand the significance of it and go through that with our family. So we try to do those things that week. We also have just fun little activities that we do on Easter Sunday. On Sundays, I always make breakfast for dinner. And so on Easter Sunday, we always do like the little resurrection rolls, or we make bunny butts is what we call it. So it's basically like, so it's like a pancake with the 2 ears and then a little dollop of whipped cream, and that it's a bunny butt. That's what we call that. So yeah, so we have those little fun traditions, but we also try to talk through what has happened and why we're doing that, and just making that a normal part of conversation. It doesn't have to be a 3-hour devotion that we do every time. That's hard for us to even maneuver and get to do that for ourselves, much less trying to get our busy schedules aligned so that we can do that as a family. So I think just making sure that we're having those conversations throughout that week, throughout that time, so that we can think about who he is and what he's done for us.
Yeah, the 3-hour devotional, unless it's an episode of The Chosen, and then,
Right.
it will be a 3-hour.
And nobody's getting anything out of it except me. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool because this and this.
I'll come watch with you. I'll watch with you, and I will get all the things. I will enjoy it.
Yeah.
But I love that even like you said, the fun too. We walk this line, of we want to honor and celebrate the scriptural tradition, but it's okay to have a little fun and to, just to enjoy the bunny. Or my parents used to do the Easter baskets for us. And that's for every parent and every family to determine what that looks like, but making room for that as well. And I don't know if your family has ever done this. I had never done it until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. There was a member of our church who was a Messianic Jew, and he led a group of us through a Passover Seder, and it was so powerful. And I think that tie-in of that, Last Supper to the Passover has always been one of my favorite connections with Jesus being the lamb and all of these different pieces. You can get that and do it at home. You don't have to wait and do it at church. You don't have to find a church to go to. Even just taking time to walk through, this is what the process would have been like. And this was why it mattered. Maybe they remember the story of Moses and all the plagues and making that connection of all the way back then, Jesus was a part of the story.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to serve during this time. And so
Yes.
we are volunteering and helping. If you're working at the church, you are volunteering and serving. Even just thinking through creating opportunities for your people to serve, whether it's helping pass out bulletins or being greeters, or helping put together gift baskets or different things for visitors, or inviting friends, giving them opportunities to invite friends, because everyone comes in for Easter and they expect, I mean, it's like Christmas where we're like consuming and we're not participating. So really making sure that we're allowing people to participate. It doesn't all need to be on your shoulders to carry everything as the ministry leader. Yes, you are a paid service person. That's your job. But also part of that is equipping your families and your kids to have opportunities to serve others during this time. So I think that's a really important rhythm that we need to incorporate if we're not already, is making sure that we're serving and not just consuming.
That's a great perspective. Brittany Nelson shared something similar last week, that a lot of times we do come in with a consumer mentality,
Mhm.
and even recognizing that as believers, Easter Sunday isn't about us. And, it's beautiful
Right.
and it's wonderful and we want to remember the significance, but we already know it. And there's people who are coming into our churches that don't. Taking that time and knowing I've done the personal preparation so that I don't have to receive. And hopefully I will, and hopefully it'll be beautiful and wonderful, but I'm walking in full and I'm ready to share the truth of Easter and the truth of what Christ
Right.
has done on the cross to the people who are coming in who don't know it yet, or maybe don't know it to the extent that I do. And helping our kids know that, helping, our families and the people that are serving with us get away from the sidelines mentality, which I think can
Right.
be pretty common in our churches today, is this idea of so and so's doing it, so they don't need me, but inviting people in. We do need you, and we do need you to be a part of this because there are people out there who don't know Jesus. And so we need to help them find him.
Absolutely. One of my directors would always say that. Don't answer for someone else. You're like, oh, they're going to say no. They might be waiting for your invitation. I think it's wrong. It's actually very wrong for you to be so worn out and burned out at the end of an event like this because you haven't delegated and you haven't opened up other opportunities for people to participate. That's part of your job too, is allowing people to serve. If we come in with this mentality, like we're not just there to like get it all done, but we're also here to equip others to use their spiritual gifts to participate. And this is a great way to do that, especially when we know we're going to have so many visitors, we're going to have so many people coming in. It's really important for us to share that with others.
Absolutely. I love Ephesians 4:11-13, that our job is to equip the saints for the work of ministry.
That's
And
right.
you are meant to be calling people to come alongside you. And I think you're absolutely right. There's some of us, I can talk to a wall, and if I want an opportunity, I will ask for it. But a lot of people are not like that, and they may
Right.
not feel equipped enough, holy enough, insert whatever enough. They may not feel like they have what it takes to serve in the church. Helping extend that invitation just removes that barrier and says you are enough and you do have something to offer, and I want to
Mhm.
invite you to be a part of it. I've invited people to serve and they've said, "Oh, I've been praying about that." And they're just
Right.
waiting for that Holy Spirit moment. You're giving them that boost to say that yes and to step into that new thing.
Yeah. And when we have big events like this, it's really easy to help transition those first time volunteers into other roles. And so if we're like, hey, we need you to be a greeter. Hey, if you want to do this every month or every week, we would love to have you. And they're like, oh, actually, I really enjoyed it. I will. So like using these big events is a great way to incorporate new volunteers who might not have been able to serve before or didn't know they could. It's a gateway to get them in.
I completely agree. I don't know if you've ever encountered maybe just trying to explain the crucifixion to kids. I had a mom
Yeah.
come up to me one time. I was fresh into my new job. I think I was 21. And she came up to me and her husband had died. And so her daughter was, I believe, 6. And she said, I'm trying to figure out how to explain like Jesus, rose from the dead. But that's maybe not the same for dad, and she was just wrestling with how do I help communicate that? Obviously, that's a very unique circumstance, but how do we communicate to kids, especially that maybe 3 to 6 or 7, where things aren't very concrete? How can we help explain this?
Well, I mean, like we said before, I think kids can grasp a little bit more than we give them credit for. And I think it's naive also to think that kids are not experiencing intensity and in their stories, like from the things they're watching and other things. So if they're
True.
able to watch K-pop Demon Hunters, but they can't hear the story of the crucifixion. We need to look at that, right? We need to pay attention to that. So I think it's really important to keep it clear. It's not really about simplifying it. It's about making it clear. And like we said, make it age appropriate. If we're like, we don't want to talk about blood and we don't want to talk about all those things, that is hard to skip over because it's so much of the story. And so I think there's ways to do it without it losing the effect and losing the weight of what Jesus did for us. And so we can talk about how it was very painful and he went through a really sad moment and he was very hurt by the things that had happened. It's okay to say those things, right? And he shed his blood. And what that means is that they cut him and they nailed him and it was very painful, but he did that because he loved us. And so if we focus the gory parts maybe on how much Jesus loved us, that he was willing to go through that because he loved us, I think it would help kids to kind of transition into thinking through what's going on. Because if they get to 12, 13, and that's when they first understand really what Jesus did, we've missed out on a lot of giving them that foundation. And like we said, if we're helping them understand the weight of everything that he went through so that resurrection is more beautiful and more exciting. If we skip over that, it's not that significant. And so we want to make sure that we are keeping it centered on the gospel and love and what Jesus did for us and how our sin is the reason that he did that. He didn't just do this for nothing. He did it because he loved us so much. Our sin causes consequences and it causes these painful things that Jesus had to go through, but he did it to have a relationship with us. Isn't that amazing? We can celebrate what Jesus did without losing the storyline and without like cutting out all the parts. I think if they're 3, I don't know that I'd go into all the blood and all the things like that. I think it really is just about making sure they understand that it hurt. It was very painful, but he did it because he loves us. And then talk about who he was, that he willingly did this. That's one of the parts of the story that always gets me whenever I hear that it wasn't that it was forced upon him. He willingly laid down his life for his friends. And he did that out of love and out of his purpose. That was his purpose, keeping it on that. And then giving them opportunities to ask questions. You're going to have some kids that are going to ask really awkward questions. Maybe we don't answer all of the questions, in the group time. Come see me later and we'll talk about that. That's a good question. But answer their questions honestly. Like, don't glaze over it because you're afraid. Because like I said, they're seeing that level of intensity and death. They're seeing it on the other things they consume. And so really helping them understand that. And this was a true story. This wasn't a movie. This wasn't just a video or something from YouTube. This really happened in real life. We want them to understand the simplicity of what it was and give them a clear picture of the gospel.
That's a great point. You're absolutely right that they are seeing things. They're seeing things in the world,
Yeah.
and there's no reason we can't share what's really going on and dive into the why. I think that's huge. I've always been a big fan of context, and I used to teach our salvation class, and my favorite thing was to start at the beginning and go with, hey, Adam and Eve, and they had a relationship with God and it was wonderful, but then they sinned and that broke the relationship. Now, not only would their outside bodies die, but their inside self would die and be separated from him. And I think when we can go all the way back and point to that, where did it break?
Right.
And even Genesis 3:15, I love, right, that there was this promise even then that Jesus would come. And when we can help explain that and help kids grasp that, whatever the terminology is. And I know we want to be careful when we use illustrations or comparisons, but being able to communicate, there was this brokenness, there was this, sin keeps us from God. I like to use a magnet. If you put a magnet on the wrong side, they won't click because they're repelled against each other, and that's what sin was. And so thinking through what are some of those age appropriate things that you can tie in that's going to help them understand, like you said, not simplifying, not dumbing it down, but clarifying. This is what it means that there was sin. This is what it means that Jesus paid the price, whether that's the example of someone paid your bill at the restaurant and maybe you didn't have any money and they did what you couldn't do. And that's what Jesus did for us, and helping them make those connections. And if you're concerned, I know every church has different demographics. You may have a lot of homeschooled kids or kids that aren't maybe exposed to as many things. So just share with parents, hey, we're going to be talking about this today. If you have any questions or any concerns, let me know. I'm happy to send you the lesson plan just so you're in the loop. Parents, if you're listening, this is an opportunity for you. You know your kids. Maybe as KidMin leaders, we have 10, 20, 30, 40 plus kids in the room. So we don't know every child individually as well as you do. KidMin leaders resourcing your parents with, here's some questions to ask, or here's a podcast to listen to, or here's some devotionals or a book that's going to put that opportunity in the hands of the parent and simplify it so that even parents who maybe don't feel equipped to have those conversations, give them a couple questions or a video that they can walk through and get a win in their hands so that they can have those conversations with their kids.
Absolutely.
If a children's pastor only had time to add one meaningful Holy Week element to their ministry, for their kids, what would you suggest? What would be maybe an addition they could add this year?
Well, it's so easy to skim through the story and then dive into the egg hunt or, do all the fun things you have prepared for that week. But what if we gave them opportunities to really have hands-on experiences for what the story was talking about? Maybe we give them palm branches on Palm Sunday, and then the next week we talk about the Last Supper, and we have juice and we have bread. We talk about the different things that Jesus did and talk about the cross and the empty tomb and all those different things, but we give them a way to walk through it. Maybe you set up little stations in your room and go through those different things. Allowing kids to experience what had happened, I think, makes the story come alive. That would be what I would suggest, is really making sure that as we're going through this story that we tell every year, that we give some kind of fresh hands-on experience for kids to really go through it and really give them an opportunity to worship and see what it was that God did for them, more than just telling them. Like, that's so much more effective, as we know, is if we give them a way to put their hands on it, to hear it, and to see it. And so offering all these different ways would be really effective and help the kids hang on to it. And making sure that you're letting your families know what you're talking about. Give them a copy of the lesson plan, or tell them, like, we're talking about this story today. Here's 2 or 3 questions that you can ask at home. And a lot of the curriculum that you use offers these family discussion questions, or, content like that. You could put it on your social media, or you could put it, on your website or in a newsletter, but give the families an opportunity to really go through and keep the conversation going, so they can experience that as well at home. I think that would be really effective if they had that hands-on experience at church, and then they're able to talk about it and process it continuing throughout the week with their parents.
That's awesome. And right now, as we're sharing this episode, it'll be March 30th. So it is Holy Week. We are officially here. And so if you're listening and you're thinking, I maybe don't feel like I've spent as much time in personal preparation as I would like to, it's not too late. You don't have to do a 40-day devotional to prepare your heart. And that's great. Maybe you plan for that next year, but go on YouVersion, find a 3 to 7 day plan. It's not too late to dive into that, or just take the time. I love at Christmas or Easter walking through the 4 Gospels and reading the different accounts of, okay, this is what Mark talked about, and this is how Luke shared it. Prepare your heart to remind yourself of the story. It's not a 3-hour devotional every morning, but just a quick moment to set your heart and make it ready, and so that you're ready to serve out of the overflow. Try to take yourself back. If you've been doing this for 18 years, take yourself back to when you started and remind yourself of why you do it and of what God's going to do, right? Build that expectancy. And whether that's a song on the way in or a short devotional, build in that space so that not only you experience it, but the people you come in contact with can see the joy of Easter and the significance of what God has done through you.
Absolutely.
And Christen, thank you not just for this episode, but for your heart for kids and families, for 18 years of investment, and now serving and continuing to invest just in a new way, right? Just a different season. And if you'd like to connect with Christen, you can check out those podcasts we mentioned. It's the 7-minute devotions for busy parents and the Collide Kids podcast. And those are available wherever you listen. And you can also find her on socials at Christen Clark. All this will be in the show notes, at Collide Kids Pod and at 7-minute devotion. So we'll share those so you can check those out. And don't forget, like I mentioned, to watch our episode from March 2nd to learn more about the youth pastor track at the KidzMatter Conference. Share that episode with your youth pastor, and then get your tickets at thekidsmatterconference.com. Christen, I would love if you would close us in a short prayer.
I'd love to. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for what you have done for us. Thank you that you loved us so much that you sent your son to die on the cross for us. And I thank you that we have this amazing privilege to share this with families and with children. We love you and we thank you for the resurrection and we thank you for what it means in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Kristen. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you all on our next episode. Happy Holy Week.